As with most our costumes, it's advisable to do a mock-up first. This is our first practice run. I used some just scrap polyester satin. Excuse my rabbit. He's decided he wants to get in on the action. Basically, this is a really good idea to get some very dirt cheap fabric and have a good practice and a good play first. But if you're really feeling confident, you know exactly what you're doing, then go ahead and start on your real fabric. But because this is the first time that we've actually done anything like this, we thought it was a good idea just to see what happens. Okay. Hello folks, welcome to my Disney Belle Gold ball gown tutorial. This is the start of my skirt. I've bought a rich gold, which is between gold and yellow, silk satin fabric. Quite thin, pretty lightweight, and it's a very nice quality satin, and I'll just show you where I bought it from. Okay, I got it off eBay. It's called 100% Silk, and that's how much it is per yard. And the seller was called Happy Good Buy. I actually bought 15 yards of this fabric, which was overestimating by about 3 or 4 yards, but I had to take into account that I also wanted the sash to go around the bodice eventually. But on top of that, I thought just to be on the safe side, it's always better to buy extra than what you need. So that's my fabric, and next we'll describe to you how we're going to go about doing the skirt. Okay, I decided on this one to do the skirt first instead of the bodice because of the trouble we ran into doing the Christine Dyer dress, when we did the bodice first and then the skirt, and we found out we had a few size issues and sticky out problems with the bodice afterwards. So I thought this time we may as well get our skirt measured properly and then work the bodice over the top to fit. Now the trouble with Belle's dress is there's many different versions out there, and it causes quite a dilemma to which one to go for. Now this is from a very old Beauty and the Beast musical I went to see in London when I was 17, some years ago now, and at first I really wanted to do this version all over, but I thought no, I actually like the skirt, but I wanted the more simplified movie version top. So we're going to go for this panelled skirt, in which on this one we think there's probably between 28 or 30 panels, but I only have a 24-inch waist, so we're putting about 24 panels into mine. And in between there's like this cording as well, which we'll go into as well in a moment.
Okay, now we're going to work out the sections for the skirt. With Tracy's height and with her wearing the net petticoat, I worked out that 66 inches or 168 centimetres would be enough to do the ruffling, to make it just about touch the floor when she was when the sections were put up against her. I'd like it to touch the floor because I want all the sections then to be turned under to create a last swag, and then all the swags will be even. So to make each one, the bottom of each section will be 12 inches wide, that's 30 centimetres, and then that gradually tapers down to 2 inches at the top, which is 5 centimetres, and you can alternate across your fabric to fit in as many sections as you possibly can. So the first section here would be 12 inches, then 2, then 12, then 2, then 12, and then you gradually taper that down. I used a tape measure to keep my edge straight. What I'm going to do now is overlock all the sections first, and then I should be ruffling each section. The tailor's chalk I'm using comes in 4 colours, which is quite handy for different coloured materials, and you probably can just make out where I've marked my material. Now, because I've got an overlocker, I'm just going to take this straight to the overlocker now and overlock straight down the lines, which means I don't have to do any other cutting. I can just do it straight on my overlocking machine. But if you don't have an overlocker, I would recommend that you neaten the edges, because this particular material does fray a lot, as does a lot of silk like this. So you have to do a small turnover first to neaten it off.
Okay, this is one of the strips cut out, and that would be the 2 inches at the top. Starts flaring out and out and out toward the bottom. And if anybody's had experience with satin, they will know that it's very hard to cut satin in a straight line, and once you've cut it, it seems to have a habit of just falling wherever it likes. You can never seem to get it to lie completely straight again. But there we go, and as Mum said earlier, she's got on her overlocker. A nice tidy overlocked edge. Alternatively, as said, if you haven't got one, then just machine and turn over your edges like so. And the next thing we'll have to do is ruffle each piece, and this is where it's important that you leave lots more at the bottom, because by the time you've ruffled it and gathered it, you would have lost a lot off the bottom of your piece.
Okay, now I'm going to do the ruffling, and these are the settings I'm using on my ruffler. Approximately 2mm of screw showing, and the lever is on number 1. We've already done instructions on how to ruffle on YouTube, and that is the title of our page, and that is the link. But we have also put this on our web page with a direct link to all our costume tutorials, which is www.tracyscostumingworld.weebly.com, and there you will find how to use the ruffler. Just showing my ruffled section. When I start right at the top, I leave at least 2 inches that's not ruffled at all, because I want to put all this into a waistband. But ideally I'd like to have the ruffling done quite uniformly all the way down, and I want it to be dragging on the floor by at least 4 to 5 inches, because eventually I'll be turning the whole thing up like that to neaten it off, so I've got swags going along the floor and they'll all be the same size. So I'd rather my ruffle panels be a little bit too long rather than too short. And here we have the first 5 sections. Before they were ruffled, they were all overlocked, because it does fray very heavily. So each one has been overlocked first on the edge and then ruffled.
Okay, between my ruched and ruffle pieces here, I'm going to put some cord, found this lovely metallic pale gold cord on eBay. I'll just show you that. Sold by a seller called TKSUMM from Witchcraft Emporium 2008, name of the shop. She sold it in 3-yard lengths, but I needed about 30 yards, so I kindly asked the lady if she would cut it at 30 yards for me instead of 3-yard strips, and she did, so she was very helpful. The whole thing, including the piping on the edge, measures 1 centimetre wide. And I'm going to show you now how to put the piping in, which is extremely fiddly. I think I'll be tearing my hair up by the end.
Okay, here's one of the ruffle pieces, and as we said in an earlier section, the width at the top is approximately 5 centimetres, and by the time you get to the bottom it'll be 30 centimetres wide. And they've all been ruffled, and I've also overlooked the edges because this does tend to fray quite a bit. If you haven't got an overlocker, you could try neatening it with a seam if you want to go to that bother. Okay, what we need to do now is to sew on a piece of piping which is cut to the length of the sections that we need. I'm not going to bother with the top for about 4 centimetres because most of this is excess anyway, and it's going to be put inside the belt at the top, so there's no point in wasting the piping. So first of all we need to pin it to the edge, which is, as Tracy said, very fiddly. You've got to make sure that your edge is straight. Leave a little bit of the overlocking exposed and then pin that on. Go all the way down. I shan't be going right the way down to the end of each panel. I'm only going to go as far as from Tracy's waist to the floor. Any excess panelling will be turned up inside and neatened off. So the next step now is to put a tacking stitch all the way down, and then we'll use a zipper foot to try and get close to the gold lining, and we'll show you how to do that later. Now sew the piping onto the edge of the ruffle, and if I show you on the back, it'll give you a better idea of where you're actually sewing your piping down. The white stitching is the ruffler, has ruffled the material, and the yellow stitching on the left is where I've sewn the piping down. You need to sew the piping just to one side, but at the same time you don't need to sew it all the way to the edge of the piping just yet. Okay, now I'm going to put my second piece on, and it's shiny side to shiny side, so turn the whole thing over like that and match up the tops. I'm just going to pin that for now. I'll tell you what you're aiming to do to keep all your overlocking at the same distance apart, and as you're sewing down here you will then come to your piping, and you're aiming to sew a little bit nearer to the piping edge and hide all this sewing that you've done previously. So you're going to be doing 3 things at once. Right, I'm just going to do a few stitches at the top to hold both fabrics together. Let's go back and forwards a bit. Oh. Okay, I'm just going to sew backwards and forwards at the top of this. Just to hold it. Now then, have a look underneath, and I'm just about to start on the piping, so check that you're going to have your needle in the right position. Right, you're going to be doing 3 things at once. First of all, you're going to be checking that these edges are together. The next thing is you're going to be checking that nothing gets trapped underneath the needle, so you're going to be making sure that's out the way and the top bit's out the way. And as you're sewing along, you can just about feel where the piping is, and you're going to be sewing just to the right hand side of it. So 3 things to take into account there. You can only do a little bit at a time, so don't rush it. What I'm doing is I'm moving the ruffles out the way, making sure that the bottom's okay, it's not getting trapped, and I'm also watching for where the piping is. Very fiddly. I'll just do a little bit more and then I'll show you what I've been doing. Okay, if you turn the material out, you'll be able to see that the piping now is right on the edge, like that, and you're aiming for that all the way down the section. I've now put on another section of panel, and right at the top I'm aiming to have about 1 inch or 2.5 centimetres between each of the piping strips. And this is what it looks like with another panel on, and all you have to do now is do that about 25 to 30 times, adding on your panels until you have enough to fit the waist. This is showing you all the panels now put together. This is the waist going down to the hem, and take a proper measurement of the waist. And Tracy's is 24.5 inches, so my final width needs to be 25.5 inches. I want to allow the extra inch for putting the zip in, and you'll need to have a waistband which is 2 inches wider than that, so this will be 27.5 inches, and it will be approximately 3 inches wide. This is just a rough one at the moment, but we're going to be doing a waistband and put some Petersham in it as well to make it stiff.